Within any structured professional environment, operations can proceed smoothly until they encounter highly disruptive variables operating below the surface of daily interaction. Psychologists categorize the most extreme forms of this interpersonal exploitation under a formal clinical framework known as the dark triad. In corporate settings, these labels are often incorrectly used as catch-all terms for a difficult boss or an abrasive colleague. This diagram isolates the actual components. The dark triad consists of three specific personality architectures: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. The analytical challenge is that, from a purely superficial perspective, the destructive behaviors produced by all three types look identical. They all lie, manipulate, and exploit. To accurately identify these individuals, we have to look past the surface-level damage and map the disparate underlying motivations driving their actions. We will evaluate each of these architectures by tracking how they calculate three distinct variables: ego, influence, and risk. By analyzing each trait as an independent operational system first, the specific mechanics of their exploitation become clear. We start by isolating the variable of ego. Treating profound psychological differences as generic bad behavior leaves organizations defenseless against the specific, targeted methods these individuals use to extract value. The first operational system is narcissism. Clinically, the narcissistic baseline is defined by grandiosity and a pervasive sense of entitlement. This model illustrates the core motivational driver for the behavior. At the center is a fragile void, the ego. To prevent collapse, that void requires an uninterrupted, inward-flowing supply of external validation. Because this entire system calibrates inward to monitor the ego, the narcissist possesses a critical deficit in affective empathy. They cannot genuinely feel the emotional state of others. To compensate for this deficit, they utilize a complex operational tactic called affect mimicry. Affect mimicry is the simulation of deep affection. By perfectly mirroring a target's emotions, the narcissist executes a love bomb, hooking the target into providing a steady, reliable stream of validation. This dynamic carries a strict expiration date, the exact moment a target ceases to provide sufficient praise or attempts to assert their own needs. The narcissist initiates an aggressive devaluation phase to discard them. Standard professional networking builds mutual capital. The narcissistic cycle is entirely extractive, oscillating rapidly between extreme affection and sudden hostility. Their worldview remains strictly localized. To a narcissist, other human beings do not possess independent agency. They operate merely as functional extensions of the narcissist's own ego maintenance. Narcissism operates as a dependency disorder. Their manipulation is an urgent response to internal vulnerability rather than a calculated desire for broad structural control. The second architecture, Machiavellianism, provides a sharp contrast. These individuals possess a complete detachment from ego dependency. They do not require praise, validation, or affection from you to execute their objectives. We can track this shift on our comparative matrix. The first row reflects the narcissist's ego, while the second row populates with the Machiavellian's core motivation, acquiring systemic influence and total structural control. To achieve this, they utilize pragmatic cynicism. Pragmatic cynicism operationalizes the belief that the ends justify the means. Morality is viewed as an artificial constraint placed on the inefficient. Their temporal orientation separates them further. Machiavellians possess a unique capacity to bypass short-term gratification in favor of long-term strategic positioning. They observe social networks and organizational hierarchies purely as deterministic systems. To them, people are chess pieces with predictable moves waiting to be arranged. Their primary weapon is calculated deception. Rather than explosive outbursts, they apply manipulation slowly over time to quietly rewrite the reporting structures or social dynamics of a workplace. Because they lack the erratic emotional neediness of the narcissist, they can operate undetected within a corporation for years, methodically climbing the ladder. Machiavellians represent a severe systemic threat. Their brand of exploitation is cold, meticulously rational, and thoroughly divorced from interpersonal emotion. This brings us to the final and most volatile corner of the triad, psychopathy. To understand psychopathy, you must strip away the previous frameworks. They lack the narcissist's need for validation, and they lack the Machiavellian's long-term impulse control. Updating our matrix for the final architecture reveals a specific core motivation: immediate gratification driven by severe impulsivity. The emotional baseline registers as a completely flat, neutral line. Clinicians define this flat baseline as a profound affective void, characterized by callous, unemotional traits. To navigate society despite this void, they deploy their primary operational tactic, the mask of sanity. The mask of sanity is the projection of extreme, superficial charm. It serves as camouflage, hiding the reality that they possess no internal emotional regulation or empathy. They act with absolute disregard for structural boundaries, for ethical codes, or legal systems. Rules exist, but they do not believe the rules apply to them. The biological reality behind this behavior is stark. They break protocols easily because they do not experience the psychological friction of anxiety, fear, or remorse. While a Machiavellian meticulously weighs the risks of a corporate power play, a psychopath will forge documents or misappropriate funds on a whim, entirely unfazed by the potential fallout of their actions. Psychopathy is exceptionally dangerous. It represents an architecture completely unbounded by fear, making their actions highly unpredictable and the resulting damage severe. How do three radically different motivational architectures manage to yield the exact same destructive results in a professional environment? Despite operating on separate algorithms, validation, control, and impulsivity, all three systems eventually reach a point of convergence. Returning to our initial notes, we map these independent pathways back onto a single social structure. The intersection point where they overlap is known as the dark core. This shared core is defined by a single clinical term: callousness. Callousness functions as an absolute, systemic disregard for the well-being and agency of others. Whether driven by ego, ambition, or impulse, the shared output is a total lack of concern for collateral damage. Taking this out of clinical theory and placing it into a real-world organizational environment exposes the vulnerability of our daily operations. This shared callousness manifests as the direct exploitation of trust. Outwardly, it presents as relentless credit stealing, systemic sabotage of colleagues, or the methodical gaslighting of teams, all to mask operational failures. Environments built on high-trust social contracts, collaborative teams, and open-door corporate cultures provide the exact resources all 3 points of the triad require to thrive. Reacting to the surface damage only treats the symptoms. Identifying the specific trait architecture allows for predictive clarity, enabling you to anticipate how these individuals will pivot when their primary motivation is threatened. True psychological defense requires moving past the attempt to spot bad people. Protection comes from logically deducing the hidden motivational vectors that drive them.